Thank you for joining Jacob City Fishing, where the goal is learning to live in the great outdoors found as we walk outside of our homes into nature and society. Colossians 1:15 through 23. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in everything he might be preeminent. For in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of his cross. And you, who once were alienated and hostile in mind, doing evil deeds, he is now reconciled in his body of flesh by his death, in order to present you holy and blameless and above reproach before him. If indeed you continue in the faith, stable and steadfast, not shifting from the hope of the gospel that you heard, which has been proclaimed in all creation under heaven, and of which I, Paul, became a minister. Paul utilizes this hymn as a means to undermine the asceticism, the forms of Gnosticism, and other Colossian philosophies that have interjected themselves and been allowed to be interjected within the church at Colossae. So it's important that we get to know what Paul is saying within this hymn so that we understand where the arguments come from later on within Colossians. So to begin, have you ever seen the statue of David or a bust? If you know what a bust is, it's basically a statue of a person from the shoulders up. And what it really is a physical image of something that represents the real person. And that's really what the word image has a relation to. That it's this physical image. Jesus is this physical image of the invisible God. He is the representation, the perfect representation of God who is not visible currently. And obviously that in lies the question to ask yourself today. Do you know who Jesus is? Because if you know who Jesus is, then you know who God is. Now, this also flies in the face against Islam and against other beliefs that would oppose that Jesus was God, or that he was that he was even here, that there was any real reflection of God's character on earth, and then the twisting of, or the lack of reverence for what Jesus did, what he said, and the twisting about what sin is and what hell is, really become on display, because if you don't take into consideration that the holy God came to earth and Jesus reflected the character and being of the Godhead on earth, then you can change whatever you want if you don't have a real serious understanding of the fact that God came to earth. And obviously on the day-to-day, when you reflect on, the past week, or you're looking ahead to today, are you considering, okay, Jesus was the image of God on earth. Maybe I should live in a way that honors him if I do profess to be like him. Consider if somebody high in authority that has a lot of power just showed up at your house. How would you feel? How would you respond? Then consider that Jesus has shown himself, and he is watching. He knows everything, and he has been to earth and dealt with your sin and done something for you that is beyond repayment. How would you respond? How should you respond? The image of the invisible God has shown up at your door. What do you do? Ask yourself whether you are living in the grace that he's given that leads to repentance and holiness, and not making excuses for your sin. Are you living in a holy way today? Thank you for taking a moment to consider what God has to say during your adventure outdoors. Please click the subscribe button below along with the notifications button on the YouTube channel so you learn how to survive and thrive in these great outdoors.